because the access to justice issues are severe and getting worse, thinking about rural legal deserts and everything. So if people are going into court alone, how do we help them?
Hi, I'm Peter Kramer, Digital Communications Coordinator with the State Bar of Wisconsin, and I'm attending the annual meeting and conference here in Madison, and I have the great opportunity to talk with some of the amazing speakers and legal stars, frankly, that are here. And so I have one of those with me today. She is Megan Lee of Judicare in Wausau, and is here on behalf of her organization, WisLawHelp, which is run by Judicare.
Correct.
And they are the Pro Bono Organization of the Year recipient. And so, Megan, thank you so much for being here, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, we're excited that we were, honored in this way, and also just to be a part of kind of celebrating a lot of different people tonight.
So I want to start the conversation by getting to know you a little bit better. So I was hoping you could just kind of introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so going back, I'm originally from Wisconsin, and went to UW for undergrad, history and sociology, thought about law, but wasn't really committed to it yet. So I worked at a marketing firm for about 3 years and then went to law school in Michigan, came back here, and during my law school experience, I really knew I wanted to work in legal aid and help people. So I ended up applying at Legal Action of Wisconsin and Judicare, and ended up at Judicare about 6 years ago now. So been there for a while. I started doing victims' rights work, so representing victims within the criminal context and then family law. And then my role really evolved. Now I'm doing more of communications and grant work as the communications and development director at Judicare. So yeah.
So Judicare is the parent organization for WisLawHelp.org.
Correct.
Is that right? So can you tell me just really in brief, what is WisLawHelp.org and how does it help people?
Yeah, so Wisconsin Law Help, or WisLawHelp, is really geared to be Wisconsin's statewide legal help website. So it came about really as an idea about over a decade ago through the Access to Justice Commission as a way to kind of centralize a lot of legal resources and information for people, and also putting them in plain language terms, because the reality is that there are thousands of people going into court, especially in civil contexts, without an attorney. They don't have that constitutional right the way that they would if they were charged with a crime. So if they're going to have to do that alone, if they can't find an attorney, how can we give them resources to be able to be as successful as possible and understand what's happening and what they need to do, really? Your
organization is the Pro Bono Organization of the Year recipient. Yeah. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
How does it feel?
It's very exciting. It's also a little scary. I feel like, a little bit of pressure there, but, we hope that part of it is that it just helps get the word out there about Wisconsin Law Help, but also getting more people involved. A lot of how we were able to be successful is that we had private attorneys, other legal aid organizations who allowed us to tap into their subject matter experts to write and review the articles that are on the site to make sure that they're legally accurate. So, really kind of, it's not just Judicare, it's not just me. We have a huge stakeholder committee of, the law schools are involved in some ways, the Wisconsin Law Library, other legal aid providers. So really kind of bringing together all of the different providers across the state to make this resource come to life is really exciting for us. And we're, happy that an idea that started over a decade ago is finally, a real thing that exists, and people can go online and go to Wisconsin Law Help and get resources and information and guidance. So that's really exciting for us. So happy to be recognized too.
You mentioned it kind of started as an idea about 10 years ago. What was the inspiration for this?
The reality is that a lot of other states already have a website like this. So I think about, where I went to law school, that was my first introduction, was Michigan Legal Help. That has existed for over a decade. So I think, we were seeing other states doing it. I think the Access to Justice Commission members, saw other states doing this and, working with the site that allowed, unrepresented people to access legal information and guidance. So that came about, at one of the, technology conferences or something, I think is when they had a conversation to think, how can we bring this to Wisconsin? because the access to justice issues are severe and getting worse, thinking about rural legal deserts and everything. So if people are going into court alone, how do we help them?
So that goes perfectly into my next question, which is just a little bit about what is the need for pro bono in Wisconsin?
It's varied, I would say, but it exists in a very strong way. So varied in the sense of, people need help with full representation on cases, but there's also clinics that are being hosted throughout the state to just help people fill out forms correctly. So, there's a lot of need because people either can't access legal aid because we are grossly underfunded, so we cannot provide representation to everyone who needs it, and there are thousands of people who need it. I know just between the two Legal Services Corporation funded organizations, I think last year we turned away about 16 to 20,000 people total who needed legal help, but we just don't have resources to provide it. So thinking about clinics, thinking about like the Marquette Volunteer Law Clinic, our program, we have a private attorney involvement program. There's just a lot for the people who cannot afford an attorney, who are traditionally eligible, so under 125% or under 200% of the federal poverty level. But there's also sort of a middle income group where they make a little too much for legal aid, but not enough to actually be able to hire an attorney and pay a retainer or pay hourly rates. So how do those people get services? How do they get that legal need met and get the help that they need? So for us, we work a lot on placing cases with private attorneys, but we know that there are different clinics throughout our service area and other parts of the state where having volunteer attorneys is really crucial to make sure that the people that are coming in to get help can see someone, can talk to an attorney about their rights and options. So it's very, very desperately needed.
And that goes to the next question I had for you, which is just talk to me a little bit about your passion for pro bono. You've joined Judicare. You've been recognized with this award. Talk to me about the passion that you have for pro bono.
It really stems from sort of the cliche of I want to help people, and also knowing that, as I was exposed to the legal system, I'm the first person in my family to go to law school. I didn't know any attorneys before going to law school. So thinking about, how confused I was with just sort of the basics of like, which table do I go to? Or, those kinds of things that, imagine if I was the person who was one of the parties and how overwhelmed I would be and how scary that would be. So I think, pro bono is a really great way to help those people, be able to navigate the court system and be as successful as possible. It's a really confusing system, and to be fair, it was set up that way. It was set up to be navigated by attorneys and people represented by attorneys. So, I think it's a way for attorneys to give back and make sure that, this system is working effectively and efficiently, just because, we've all seen it, honestly. If there's a case going on ahead of us where both of the parties are unrepresented and they're struggling and they didn't fill out the forms correctly or they didn't ask for what they want the right way, so then they're having to reschedule and come back, and it just really can bog down the court system and also just isn't really helping those people to get something that they desperately need, whether that's child support or some sort of stay on their eviction or whatever it might be. So I think attorneys can play a really crucial role in being there for somebody else, and sometimes even just having an attorney call or write a letter to a landlord to say like, hey, could we work out a payment plan, can take things in a totally different direction than what that tenant was able to do alone. So I think it's really important.
So let's talk a little bit then about attorneys doing pro bono. They're busy people.
Yes.
So do you have any advice or words of wisdom for attorneys who are looking to build pro bono into their own practice lives?
Yeah. I think, especially being on the Legal Assistance Committee, we have some private attorneys who are involved, so I've gotten their perspectives too, because, it's different when you have a firm and you are charging your clients, and, I get that, it's a business too. So, a lot of what I heard was going with somebody else, finding a friend who already does, an attorney friend who already does pro bono, can really sort of demystify that whole experience. So, if there's a clinic that someone goes to and volunteers at, ask if you could tag along. It's a lot scarier if you do the buddy system, but also, it doesn't have to be overwhelming. Like, there are small ways to get involved, there are big ways to get involved. Even doing so, like I do free legal answers, the ABA has that. Just doing that kind of and taking, 10, 15 minutes to pull in the forms and the law and the processes that I already know, because that's what the practice I do, it can make a big difference for that person. So even just taking some time to answer some questions or, whatever you can fit into your practice schedule, I think is important. But also, we post, other legal aid organizations post on the State Bar's Pro Bono portal. So having, the ability to really search by what your practice area is, like what are you comfortable doing? What time commitment are you comfortable making? I think that's incredibly helpful too, so, yeah.
What do you think are some of the benefits that attorneys derive from doing pro bono?
Just practically, sometimes CLE hours, so that's helpful. But I think there is, it feels good to give back to your community. It feels good to be able to do something and know that you helped a person with, something that you do in your everyday practice, and, it was easy oftentimes for you to be able to get in there and help people. But also, sometimes it can involve learning, because I know of different programs where even us, we do essentially CLEs to be able to help our private attorneys, get those credits, and also learn additional skills to be able to expand their practice and really get, especially for newer attorneys, get their feet wet a little bit in different areas of the law, or if they want to, explore other areas. That's also a really great way to, get some training and then kind of be able to explore it a little bit.
Are there lessons that you feel that you've learned from pro bono work that you might share with other attorneys?
I think the biggest lesson is, this is so strange, but all of these clients that we work with are human beings who have very complicated lives. And I think sometimes it can be frustrating as an attorney because you know the answers that you need. You know the answers that would be helpful. And sometimes, a lot of clients that I work with have dealt with a lot of trauma in their life. So, they might not be answering questions right, or they're going off on stories. So thinking about, this is a person who has a lot going on right now, is trying to stay housed, keep food on the table, take care of their children, keep working. So, giving people grace and having patience with people, I think is a really important lesson, and really helped me develop kind of trauma-informed lawyering skills that are really applicable to all clients. Just thinking about, being more compassionate and being more understanding of people to be able to kind of build trust and work with them better, I think is really a helpful skill from doing pro bono work.
With WisLawHelp and with Judicare, what's next? Where do you go from here?
Yeah, so we actually are very fortunate. We are working with some funding that we received to do additional development on Wisconsin Law Help. So that includes expanding our content into different areas. We really started with what we see as having the most needs, so family law, housing, and consumer issues. But we know that there's a lot of other legal topics out there that aren't covered typically by attorneys. So expanding into more public benefits, employment barriers, really trying to expand what's available for people to use and access. But then also developing additional features on the site, walking people through processes in different ways, so visual aspects and things like that. So continuing to expand and make the site useful, and also adding in components so that we can make sure that the legal information is staying current and accurate as well. So that's exciting for us.
Any final thoughts from this experience or to other attorneys looking to do pro bono work?
Just getting over that first case or that first experience in pro bono is huge, to sort of realizing oh, this is actually something that's manageable and I can do it. So just, find a clinic, find something that you feel comfortable in so that you can get started, because once you do, I think a lot of what I've heard from, private attorneys is that it's a lot easier than they realized, and it's actually super rewarding for them to be able to help other people And, maybe it's an hour or two a month or maybe more, depending on the person, but just take that first case or take that first clinic opportunity and do it, because it'll be great.
Megan, thank you so much for chatting with me
Yeah.
and for all the work that you and WisLawHelp and Judicare are doing. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you so much. It was great to talk to you.